All right, Foundations of Algebra, my one and only math class this year. We are going to do classifying numbers. And I know that you may feel like we're starting off a little easy this year, but make sure you develop some good study habits because it will get a little more challenging, okay? Just enjoy, being able to build those good habits with some nice material. All right. So we are going to start off with a story. And I would like you to be able to tell me back the story when you get to class before I start to answer this question. We have the beginning of time, a caveman. And that caveman hunted rabbits for his cave wife. So we're going to call this caveman Harry. And he hunted rabbits for his wife, cave woman Sherry. And, he would bring one rabbit home and one rabbit. There was no problem. But then, sometimes he had two rabbits that he would bring home. 2 rabbits. And he had to use numbers to show Sherry that he had more than one. Now he had 2. Sherry should be proud of Caveman Harry, right? So, and then one day he brought home 3. He was like pretty tickled, and she was pretty happy with Caveman Harry that day. So that is the first number system. Those numbers are called natural numbers. Have you ever heard of those? Some people call them counting numbers because numbers are for counting, right? That's the first thing you learn when you're a little kid. Then stuff started to turn for the worse, okay? There was a day that Caveman Harry came home and he had 0 rabbits. So sad. 0, 1, 2, 3. So then our counting number system got a little bit bigger by one number, one very important number, 0. Then we had the whole numbers. Ever heard of those? So that's the difference, is that number 0. And it's a very emotional number. But guess what? It got worse. One day, Caveman Harry didn't have any rabbits again, but he didn't dare go home to Caveman woman Sherry with no rabbits because he learned his lesson. He said, I cannot do that again. And so he went to Caveman Larry's house. All right, so don't worry because Larry had a couple extra rabbits. So what did he do? He let Caveman Harry borrow the rabbits. And what does that give us? Well, if you borrow something, you do have to give it back eventually. Okay, it feels good for the moment, but you realize you got to pay that back. So that is called a negative number. So there are those things. And that is called the integers. When we are borrowing, we don't actually have. We feel like we have, but we don't have. And then when we get more, we have to give back those rabbits. Integers, not just negative numbers, but also the positive numbers. All negatives and positives put together are the integers. Okay, so everything was going, it's okay. Caveman Harry was borrowing from Caveman Larry, but then it got even worse because Caveman Harry still couldn't find any rabbits, and Caveman Larry he was down to his last rabbit. And they both, they were good friends, so they had to figure out what to do. So what did they do? They split that rabbit in half, just like what good friends would do, right? And what kind of numbers does that give us? That gives us a fraction, right? So boom, the rational numbers. Rational numbers. So we call that in precise terminology, an integer divided by an integer. Or you could say aka fractions and decimals. But not just fractions and decimals. 1 is a rational number, -7 is a rational number, 2/5 is a rational number, 0.78. So pretty much all the numbers that you know are rational numbers, except, and see, so for the cave people, everything was working fine with the rational numbers. But when we started to study, we found that there are also lots of irrational numbers. What does irrational mean? I want you to write this down. Cannot be written as a fraction. Yeah. So numbers like pi, you'll learn about e, the square root of 2, the square root of 5. There's actually a lot of irrational numbers, and they are usually represented by symbols or symbols, because they have no end and they have no pattern. But we can see this number is negative. There's no decimals. So it's an integer. It's a rational number. Let's do one more. The square root of 40. So any non-perfect squares are irrational. Okay. All right. So moving on, now we're going to talk about approximating square roots. So in week 1, we talked about our square root list. 1, 4, 9, 16, 20, 25, and so on. And you can see we have the square root of 14. So where does that fit in our list? The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. 3, 4, 5, right? And so the square root of 14, that's in between the square root of 16 and the square root of 25. So that means that the square root of 14 is going to be, what's it going to be? It's going to be it's not in between there. It's in between 9 and 16, right? So the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. So the square root of 14 must be 3 point something. And it's closer to 16 than it is to 9. Because if I added 2, I'd be at 16. But from 9 to 14, that's adding 5. So I'm going to say it's about 3.8. It's just more important. It's important to know it's not in the middle. It's not 3.5. It's closer to the top number. So maybe 3.8, maybe 3.7. We're just approximating. And the important thing to know here is that it's 3 point something. So it's going to be our smallest number in this list. Okay, and you can see here, just like this one, the square root of 105 without a calculator. Well, we know that the square root of 100 is 10, and the square root of 121 is 11. So that's really close to 10. So maybe between 10 and 10.5. All right, so something like that. Comparing irrational numbers. So you can see we can use the same, we can continue to approximate, right? Square root of 75, that's in between 64 and 81. It's 9, that's 8. And so where is 75 in there? It is 9, no, it's 11 more than the square root of 8. And it is 6 to get to the square root of 9. So it's closer to 9 than to 8. So maybe 8.6, 8.7. But we know it's 8. And then this is going to be 6 point something, maybe 6.8. And then we got the 7. So There we go, comparing those irrational numbers. And then, 3 pi, well, we all know that pi is approximately equal to 3.14159. So go ahead and multiply that by 3. That's going to be 9 point, whatever 14 times 3 is, somewhere around that. And so you can move these around. Okay, so I think you got that. And then the last one, you get to use a calculator. So go ahead and use your calculator. You might need a calculator if you want to use Desmos. You can use that too. And they even let you use Desmos on, what's it called now? The MCAP. So Desmos is 2 times 6. 2 times 6. What in the world? Wow. Okay. Anyway, type it in there or use your graphing calculator, or don't use your phone calculator because you can't use your phone in class. So have fun with this one and don't get used to using your calculator because we're not going to do that a whole lot. And then when you are done with that, the quiz 1 is going to be a combination of everything you've done so far. So go back and look at those organizer posts and make sure you're ready. And then you should only have to do that one time, but it'll be everything together. All right, so go get them. You got this.